Make sure you hold on tight because this test ride is on something no other manufacturer has ever tried to touch. Our world is obsessed with performance, whether it's pulling over 100 horsepower per liter of displacement in supercars or jamming the biggest motor available under the hood of a hopped-up sedan to 800 plus horsepower pickup trucks. We love power and performance, and that's nothing new for Polaris, who broke all barriers with the 2-liter, 225 horse Pro R Razor. And today, I'm on an off-road vehicle that you straddle, and that's also in the category of biggest and most powerful, but a slightly different product than you may be used to seeing it in. The 2023 Polaris Sportsman XP 1000S is the pinnacle of power and performance. If you want the best sport utility ATV ever produced, this is it. In fact, no other manufacturer has ever tried to compare. At a shocking 55 inches of width, this is the biggest footprint of an ATV ever produced. It boasts 14.5 inches of clearance and 14 inches of rear travel, and is as stable at high speeds as it is confidence-inspiring. While this Sportsman has some visual cues of a traditional Sportsman XP, the look is where the similarities end. Now, a few years back, Luke was the one who did the test ride on the first version of the XP 1000S, and I was a little bit ticked off, if I'm being honest. Not because I didn't love the vehicle, but because I didn't get to do the test ride, but today, I get to. Now, there's some things that have to be discussed about the 1000S before we go much further, because while it is the most capable ATV ever produced by Polaris, it's not a pure sport. It's not a supercar of the ATV world. The bodywork of the Sportsman and the racks and hitch receiver state otherwise, so don't write this thing off as something that's just for going fast. This ATV is incredibly versatile and comes with a 3,500-pound Polaris HD winch, as well as the 2-inch receiver that'll pull 1,750 pounds, and the built-in racking have a 500-pound capacity. It's as serious about performance as it is about putting in a hard day's work on the farm or out to the deer stand. Now, under the hood of this Sportsman sits the 89-horse ProStar mill, and it works awesome. Linking up with that is the multi-select power steering that also works in harmony with the ProSteer front end. And the ProSteer front end makes bump steer a thing of the past, but it is exclusive only to the Scrambler and Sportsman XP 1000S models. Now, to argue anything but that this front end is the absolute best performing four-wheel drive ATV suspension ever produced would be like arguing that gravity doesn't exist. It's futile. While work and play is a reality for this Sportsman, you can put the entire 14 inches of rear suspension travel to work out on the highest speed trails and find that there's nothing else like this ATV. It's an absolute beast, from the hard-packed wider trails to whoops and G-out bumps to the slower and more technical terrain you find headed back into the bush on your local trails. The rolled IRS chews through bumps that you'd wince at with the competitor's best comparable suspensions. Up front, you have high-arched A-arms and almost 12 inches of suspension travel that give you buttery smooth compliance and go through just about anything. And the ground clearance? Well, let me tell you, at 14 inches, the only thing comparable is a jacked-up mud runner. But with all that said, one of the shocking realities of the XP 1000S is the fact that it still uses 27-inch tires. They really aren't that big of a tire for a rig this large in stature. But I appreciate the traditional tire setup with the Duro Power Grip V2s all the way around in a 9-inch wide front and 11-inch wide rear. If Polaris had gone any bigger, the sportiness would suffer, and making this rig any taller would most certainly start to be felt as the CG naturally has to increase with this much ground clearance. With that said, the 55 inches of width is the sweet spot, and Polaris knows just that. It's not too wide that it's awkward on traditional trails, but at the same time, it's wide enough that it allows for that super long travel suspension as well as the insane ground clearance. It gives you absolute comfort, control, and stability. It's actually hard for me to quantify the stability you feel at speeds higher than you'd expect to feel stable with the Sportsman XP 1000S. Now, let's all keep in mind that this may be the most expensive ATV ever produced besides the Scrambler sibling, so you should be getting groundbreaking performance. And while there really isn't much to gripe about with something this well thought through and designed, the fact that the shocks went from a Walker Evans piggyback on Luke's test ride unit now to a steel body no-name shock for 23 is a little bit disappointing, as that premium suspension package really did fit the build. When everything from the brake lights to top pod and headlights are all premium LED, as well as the Ultimate Series front and rear bumpers, the higher-end shocks on the first-year models were a nice inclusion. Now, I know that I focus on performance a lot, but that's because it's just so hard to ignore with an ATV like this. But keep in mind, this does have serious work capacity. The front rack has a capacity of 200 pounds. The rear rack is at 300 pounds. And these racks aren't just an afterthought and thrown on here. They have multiple really significant aluminum tie-down points for ratchet straps and other tie-downs. And then on top of that, there's so many lock and ride points that you can accessorize this ATV to do exactly what you want it to do. When the 1000S models first came out, we questioned Polaris why they built them. And their response across the board was because they could. Polaris isn't giving up on the ATV market just because side-by-sides are gaining in popularity. And pushing forwards and continuing to make the XP 1000S models shows their commitment to the ATV industry. And after putting in some serious seat time on this one, I gotta tell you, I'm sure glad that they are.